Hey, what's going on? How ya doing, YouTube troopers? Hopefully somebody come on in. I know it's been a minute. Okay. Let me see something. No, I don't want to stop streaming. Okay, it's locked, so let me do it this way. I know it's late night. I haven't been on here consistently. I've been trying to come on here every night. But I had been sick, recovering from a cold, and taking care of my grands, trying to see if some people are up. Probably not, but anyhow, I'm gonna kick it live, and hopefully the algorithm will do me some justice and get it out there in the opening. So I was up here in my space trying to clear some things up. Well, it certainly was. Still working on this space here. But what I wanted to talk about was, this is supposed to be Hip Hop History Month. And I try to map out like 3 main points that I want to drive on tonight about hip hop and everything, because I'm a native New Yorker. I'm an unsung hip hop pioneer. I'm one of the first females to do it in certain parts of Queens that I know of, if not the entire Queens. And so just so happens is that I'm not the only one. I'm like the only one that has the gall to tell the truth, because I'm not worried about a brand. I'm not worried about paying to play. And there's a lot going on with this distortion of history, especially with hip hop. Now, I've been, researching, and I hit a lot of places in my time, and I got caught up in some situations in life that unfortunately I didn't have the proper adults to support me, to protect me. All I had really was the music and the mic. How you doing? Yes or no? What, number one? I think I'm about number one. Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to find out when Dimple started. But in any event, I was born and raised in Queens. In fact, I was born in Elmhurst at the time, and my parents split, and we lived in South Jamaica for a minute till my mother could get herself together, because she was a wreck. And I believe that's the reason why I'm an advocate. But I need to take it a step back. For me, when my parents was together, music has always been a staple for those that grew up in the South, that migrated from the South, and, coming across the river, and music was a form of communication. My grandfather and my great uncles, they all had a band and they played blues. And I just adored music, and especially the performing arts, because I had a black and white television. Now, with that being said, my parents split, sometimes, the dysfunctional. My parents split. My mother was not really mentally stable. And we wind up living from a plush lifestyle to me being displaced once again and moving to the south side of Jamaica Queens. I recall living one place on top of a barbershop on Liberty and South Road. And I'm working on some things. So, we have some projects going in. Will probably be taking you all on this pathway of my journey. And thereafter, we moved to 164th Street, which was a rooming house. I never forget it, Miss Mackey. She was very extravagant, very elite, with the long cigarette, with the cigarette holder. She used to make homemade grease. My hair was down my back. And ironically, we had family that lived on the same block. And thank God for family. But in the event, everybody was musically inclined. So thereafter, when I was about 4.5, 5 years old, I think my mom was registered. I know she was registering me for PS50, and she was pregnant again, but she fell down the steps and she had a miscarriage. Thereafter, we wind up moving to St. Albans. In the past, I've said, I started in Hollis, which I did. I emceed in Hollis and as well in St. Albans. But to me, it was always all one. But, as history and as clarification have it being said, that it wasn't all one. It was, separate. But to me, everybody was all one. But however, it was in South Jamaica. My mom was a Jehovah's Witness. You hear a lot of people that's in the industry like DMX, Cat Williams, various different people were children at the Kingdom Hall. My mother was off the hook, and my cousin that lived on 164th Street, their mom was a witness. And like I said, my mom was just, she would be missing in action. She was just a wild child. Not a wild child. She was a wild adult because she never had a chance to, you don't like how hip hop let everybody in. Right. Exactly. You're right about that. You don't like hip hop. They let everyone in. People love welcoming everyone to the barbecue. That's why it isn't not united. And it never will be. Absolutely. It created so much division. It created what I don't like about it. Well, let me just finish on my little journey here, how I began. So there was friends at the Kingdom Hall, and my mother, she had left two kids down south. She was pregnant. I think she had my brother at 15 or 14. And his father was a grown man. And he wound up going to jail for that in the South. And at that time, they would ostracize you. I didn't know all of this until I started investigating and getting a lot of history. I need to say both parents are deceased. They transitioned very young, as well as my oldest daughter. However, it was in South Jamaica that I was friends with someone around my age group, but my cousins were older. So a lot of times I spent a lot of time down the street at my cousin's house. They were older. The girl cousins didn't particularly like me because, I still had this bratty attitude, because I had the gold silver spoon at one point and didn't realize it was snatched from me and, all of that stuff. And I probably was just a different child because I was very creative and I adored music and I loved musicals. But in the event, I went over to, I used to beg my mother because my mother didn't always have food for me when we moved to St. Albans. It was a lot. She was under the care of Creemore, which is a mental institution, before we had even moved from Elmhurst to Jamaica Queens. And so, in the event, I was always looking to get away, because I knew that there wasn't something really healthy in that household. So I went to my friend's house, Toots and Mona and her siblings, the brothers, Pooh, John. It was quite a few of them, but they lived across the street from the park, Lincoln Park. And I had to go to her because they have all of these discrepancies with the timeline. Now, the way that the narrative is being spent, like everything started in the Bronx. And I don't agree with that because I had the opportunity, once I left home at 13, I got a chance to experience the outer boroughs, what was going on. So for many years, I knew what was going on in Queens because I rapped and MC'd all over the place. And it wasn't because of I heard another female. It's just that I thought that I could be as better than the guys. And I was on the double dutch team. And, we used to do those hand games. So all of that is like rhyming and it's rhythm. So I was always attracted to that. And I was a very smart, witty young kid because I was raised basically an only child. So every weekend I was over there at Lincoln Park. When they found out I could really rap with Spanky, Jamaica sounds, it was cipher sounds, and later on I did play with Infinity Machine, and I got caught up with them Disco Twins, and that's a whole nother animal. But yeah, so I remember going to the input educational day for the university, which at the time it was called the Universal Hip Hop Museum up in the Bronx. And being the fact that I have had so many hiccups in the music industry before a lot of crews went commercial, because there weren't a lot of females, but I know that there were quite a few females from all the different boroughs. And the way that the narrative is being spent, and then you have guys that I came up with in St. Albans and Hollis that I, basically could tell you they were square pegs. They couldn't get out the neighborhood. They try to challenge my history and where I began and say, oh, she was too young. But I can say the truth of the matter that it was a lot of the preteens because, disco was a big thing. They had these clubs, and a lot of us youngins at trigger 10 years old, we couldn't get into those clubs. Even though my family, when I was about 5 or 6, they used to have these dances over there down Sufton Boulevard at Deborah Hall and the Masonic temples, things like that. And us as kids, that was bring your own bottle, right? That's what I told Grandmaster Cass on Rock the Bell Radio. And, once they, found out that I believe that when they had that educational day, which happened to be in Dumbo, Brooklyn, about the museum, because in order to do that, you have to prove in paperwork that you have canvassed New York City and these various different demographics and in residential areas. And I think they had one in the South or what have you, but they didn't really announce it too much, and they wasn't really promoting it. But I happened to come across it, and even though I didn't have commercial success, right? I was with a group called Silk and Lace, and we'll get to all of that. And they happen to have a top 100 Billboard hit, right? But nobody got paid. And it was just a lot of shady and shiciness from the inception of this thing. Um, I know that I was always careful because Spider D was trying to, put me on. He was from my neighborhood. In fact, he's the first person that took me to Power Play Studio. And I must say, a lot of things that I learned in hindsight that stagnated me was the people that I had around me. I left home at 13 years old, and sometimes the company you keep don't always have good and positive motives behind you. It's that you are way and the means for other scenarios, if I must say, if I can put it as a good choice to words. So once I, was really like into my flow and learning how to just, flow off the dome, I would write little raps. So I have quite a few intellectual properties. Then when I went home to St. Albans, after the weekend, and it had to be like 1977, and I went down south, well, they had DJs down there in this small town that they were trying to get it going on. My mom's hometown, which is called Columbia, North Carolina, Terrell County, right? And they had two DJs, Big J and Big Mike, right? And the reason how I can say their names is because I have an old flyer that one of my brothers happened to have, which was a good thing. And I rapped with Big Mike, even though it was Big J's system, but it was Big Mike on the tables. And they always credit Herc with this merry-go round, like the breakbeat. And, I keep trying to recollect. And I've never been to any of Herc's parties, the community center, because in Queens, it was a little different, even though they have projects in Queens, like Queensbridge and all of that. That's later on for me. I grew up in a residential area. So down south at Billy Wood's place, right, was pumping right across the street from the Piggly Wigglies. And like I said, I had two other siblings, brothers that were down south, and they were older than me. And we could go in there because they didn't sell alcohol, and that was the place to be. And they put on a record, and I could have sworn they was just cutting into the breakbeat, and I bought the whole damn place down, to the extent that they wanted me to come again, and they had wrote down their number on the flyer, and the whole town was talking about it. This was in 1977, right? Even though they said Herc was doing his thing in 1973, it's just like really crazy. Like I said, after that time, I was sneaking out. And when I came home to St. Albans, we had future sounds, we had ebony sounds, and we had unique sounds and magic sounds, right? And I believe that they were also DJing in 1976. It just wasn't only Lincoln Park on South Jamaica, because Eric E, he had a system. He was with Future Sounds. And so, the block parties, the parks, the avenues, Future Sounds really gave me the opportunity to kind of progress. And it was Lucius. Lucius was one of the hottest rappers, MCs. We had Eddie D, who is Ed Lover. You understand? We all from the same area. And I was the only female for many, many years. I encountered Sweet Tea. I encountered Cheryl Salt before she started MCing. I know Dimples D from when I was over there in Queensbridge. Nasty T from over there in Corona. So, and I met those twins when I was 13 years old. And for some apparent reason, right, they want to change and do a spin. And it's like everybody's twisting a story so that they can be in the Bronx Museum. Now, if you all don't know, they had the founding fathers, right? They also had another documentary, and I remember one of those twins calling me up, wanted me to come out, but I had a granddaughter that was born that was very sick. And I had to tend to her, and I had so many hiccups with them until, you just don't trust, and it's like, you know, what their motives are, because it was just a dog eat dog. And especially when it crossed over, commercial. And before, when it went commercial, we heard about what Sugar Hill and Sylvia Robinson was doing to a lot of people up in the Bronx. I was approached by Sylvia Robinson too. And like I said, by that time, I wasn't at home. I was in the kids' shelter. I was staying in the group home. And I thought that we had gotten discharged because we kept going AWOL, because we was going to the jams. And then, when I was in the kids' shelter on Union Hall Street, that was a hub that housed all the children within all the 5 boroughs, right? And that's where you saw different flyers. So I saw flyers of Herc and the Herculoids, the mighty Sasquatch. I remember meeting Breakout because it was Little Man and Howie and a guy named Rodney, not Rodney C, that was familiar, was from Bronxdale, and they were familiar with the Park and Disco King Mario. So, in 1978, I had the pleasure of witnessing that park up there in the Bronx when Mario was playing it, because I'll never forget about it, because he had the disco lights. It was like a whole ensemble. And I remember meeting Grand Wizard Theodore. I don't know if he had the Mercedes ladies then, but I remember meeting Grand Wizard Theodore, and that park was damn packed. And Mario was nice enough, and they let me get on and rock. And I brought the whole spot down. But it was like I would, like a ghost, I would stick and move. You know what I mean? And come to find out later on that Mario and I are related. And also another female MC, Yvette, and her partner. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, it is. And oh, can't think of her partner's name right now, but I wrote it down because I've been taking notes. Um, what I'm in talks of doing a documentary because I danced to the beat and the drum of a different melody than what they would like me to do, because for me hip hop was designed and was created, one, by a lot of the preteens, two, just like Green Eyed Jeannie does say, a lot of those kids that was in the kids shelter on Union Hall Street, they were jostling. Like Little Man, he was a jostler. And he was on the flyers because he was a dope MC too, And I think he had scoliosis. I didn't understand what it was then, but yeah, they was getting money. And unfortunately, the boys were being preyed upon someone that worked at that facility. And that's why I've been a very big advocate when it comes to children, boys, and even girls, because I look back sometime of the images of watching some of the boys coming through the pathway, because I'm an empath, and looking like, damn, it looks like something is wrong, but they would have their bag of McDonald's and whatever, foods they had, but come to find out they were being groomed and preyed upon by a staff member there. And I think I was the longest kid to stay there because I didn't have a juvenile court history. Wasn't going to Spofford, even though I had to kick some behinds in there because I've always been short. And to be a female and to be an MC and to have a lot of attention, that was a lot of heavy weight to carry on your shoulders because you're doing something different, and the jealousy and envy is there, which I didn't really realize it. But, I got a chance to meet so many other children, whether or not they were creative, but like just a few that was my friends. That's how I got to Harlem. That's how I got a chance to MC in the battlegrounds. Um, in fact, she knew people in the Lennox Lounge because she was one from what I think 132nd, and I knew a guy named FM. A lot of the gangsters and the early rappers from Harlem. So, and I remember an incident what happened to FM. So, yeah, I remember, the 5% Nation being involved, and there was a couple of female MCs that were Earths. Okay. And this, we're talking 1978. We're past the B girl whole era and the whole gamut, because some girls that befriended me, but they were actually frenemies, right? They will be girls. I used to break down and all of that stuff and do the break, the burning and stuff like that. And they used to do all of like the break dancing. This is before Rocksteady. Before Rocksteady. This background that I have, this is Queens Hip Hop History Month. And if you see, I'm right here next to Ralph McDaniels. On the other side is one of the Disco twins. That's Robert. He was born after his twin, Reggie, right? And everything was fine. And I tried to play nice in the damn, sandbox. But as a kid and having to survive and being a rebel and having to always rock and roll with myself, but I had cousins, my cousin Jamaica, he was in the Seven Crowns. And oh, I meant to tell you, he used to come get me out the kids' shelter when he found out where I was at. My dad came and visited me because he was out of town and he was, in a different kind of life. And he was trying to convince me to go home. And I was like, I'm not going back home, because everybody knew that my mother was not mentally stable. So I was like, I had to take stock and protect myself because I spent many years protecting her. And like I'm a kid, you know? And so I can't tell you who was in 48 Park and who was in 150 Park because I was with my cousin Jamaica and he used to come get me. And once he found out that I could rap, it was on and popping. He would drag me, make sure I was okay, make sure he checked. And he was down with the Seven Crowns. So he was down with Fat Cat and all of them. So, and I had cousins that were down with the Black Spades. And one of my cousins, Tony Hill, his father lived in Flushing. And that's how I believe Tony created some spades in Flushing. So as I roll out this channel, I am going to be bringing on guests that have like more information. Again, like I said, I haven't been in the best of health and I'm raising my two grandchildren that have special needs and they have trauma because I lost my daughter almost 8 years ago. But I'll be getting to that too. But however, yeah, so that's how I was like getting around, cats from Brooklyn. And I was still going home to Hollis. That's when Hollis Day, they used to have like 3 blocks and they had DJs on each block. And I remember LL, I believe him and his mom, they lived on Mangum Street. And that's the same block that Donovan Richardson, from my understanding, grew up on that block. He was born in 1983. So he doesn't really know about our history and like hear who the real founders are from that whole section and that whole area. So I've had to be an advocate and be a mouthpiece. And I've received a citation in the 50th year of hip hop from Vivian Cook, rightfully so. But being the fact that I got beef from this big old, these guys, I won't mention their name, that did a whole lot of shiesty stuff. And that I know firsthand of a lot of the ins and goings on. And I've had the opportunity to give a testimony to the Commission for New York State Reparations, which I think that that's just a ploy that the Democrats have because you have that money and those acts have to be done by the federal government. And there's a lot of terminology, and I've read on other states how, when they were doing the investigations on the lineage lines, that they wanted people to alter the stats. And they fired one individual. I was reading it in the New York Times. Sorry, I went off target, for a second there. But I was able to give testimony because of the complex trauma that I endured on the road to from jamming where it was innocent and children were protected until what became hip hop. And, you know, people don't necessarily like what I have to say because it's truthful. And I really believe that, again, like I started out, those club guys, right? They saw what a lot of things were going on in the park, whether or not it was Disco King Mario, whether or not it was Jamaica Sounds, it was Brain Damage, it was Cypher Sounds, it was Infinity Machine, um, there was DJ Parks. It only wasn't the Disco Twins. They had a big sound system, and so did Infinity. But there were other crews too that they combined their equipment, you know. They were notorious for certain systems, yes. But there were other crews, like my cousins had a crew in 1979, Atomic Sounds, and we battled Cypher Sounds. But before there was a battle with Cypher Sounds, we had already battled Cypher Sounds and Future Sounds. You understand? And I was hoping that they were really looking to get the true history. And that's one of the reasons why I figured, I was there, I witnessed it, um, and I could provide some insights because I had they had talent shows inside the shelter. I was the captain of the cheerleading team. We played the WBLS Sure Shots. Um, I'm sure that there's archives there, but my plate is full, and I'm really looking for, I have to probably get a team to like ascertain a lot of that archive. But I've been good at obtaining some lost documentations and lost flyers and even witnesses that can attest that were there, because that's how serious it is. Because when you're tampering with history, and I believe that people are purposely doing that, and that has been the downfall for Black folks, period, throughout history, even with slavery. These kind of things set us back. And we sell, no, not me, but people sell themselves out. They'll sell a whole crew just so that they can obtain more riches, more control, and more power. And I can tell you from the time that I walked in there, and it was a gasp, and everybody wanted to know who I was. And ironically, some of the guys that was in the music industry remembered me from Brooklyn, because I had did some studio work with some other guys, and people don't want to hear, oh, she played with Grandmaster Flowers, because I just wasn't only idle with the Disco Twins, because there was some things going on. And once we would discharge out the group home on Linden Boulevard, and I must say I was a staple at the Black Spectrum Theater too, that was located initially on Linden Boulevard. And I used to go over there for solace, because music and dance was a safe haven for me. So even within periods of my life, I've always gone back to what felt good, far as the good vibration, because music is very translucent. And with hip hop, it's definitely has lost its way. It has. And people that say, oh, it's $1 billion business. It is, but who has been benefiting off of it? Who has been the benefactors? Salt and pepper is in legal litigation because they don't own anything. Even with the group Silk and Lace that I was supposed to be in, which was like a big sham, and they got me once again. They tried to get me again down in 2012, but I don't play when it comes to children and the way that certain things have being done that has been done in the past. Like I said, with the reparations, we have to do a lot of inwardly. There's a reparations that have to be that has to be owed to artists, even in hip hop, because you can't tell me that a lot of females and a lot of males did not survive because of a lot of the actions and a lot of the stuff that was going on. So when I see a clique of the gang, I get a chance to say, you know what? They all are in the same gang. And I'm blessed. People to say, oh, you blessed to have survived. Yeah, I may have survived, but not unscathed. You know, not unscathed. It's horrible when people put you in harm's way. It came a point where when I was with my cousin's crew, Atomic Sounds, and we had Liberty Park locked. We was in 40 projects. We battled U Crew. So many different incidents, right? I was the only female, and a lot of times the difference between a lot of the other boroughs than the Bronx, uh, they had a good idea of marketing and thinking that, the girls would be a spotlight, which was cool. But then you had these other men that was so egocentric that and self-centered, and I can say narcissistic, because you can categorize them, and I'm just speaking in general, and I'm not saying everybody, but they did not want the shine taken off of them. And they use people, the cutthroat, the backstabbing. It's the same layout for suppression and oppression. And it's what happened in slavery. And if we're not careful, we'll be right back there in the name of hip hop. And it seems to me a lot of people are receiving a lot of accolades because they've been quiet. Now, I have been around the business for decades, so you heard, and I've worked in different capacities. But you heard, and I'm ostracized because I speak up, because too many people have been injured. And as a first generational, we, when we did our battles, it was about edifying, it was about implementing self-confidence, it was about giving knowledge, giving wisdom to children that may have been in bad predicaments and teenagers. It wasn't about degrading and demeaning. And I really believe that it had been those negative connotations, not all aspects. Like Queen Latifah, she came out, it was like unity, that whole 80s. Yes, they did their thing. Even Cheryl. Cheryl doesn't acknowledge me in the freestyles on the B-53 bus. She doesn't acknowledge me with, handing out flyers when I was supposed to play at Queensbridge with some guys. And I packed the house and they didn't want to pay me. I can go on and on. And it's just so repulsive how these people are being put up on pedestals for this collateral damage, if not a lack of better word, that they have caused. And me specifically, it was like a domino effect. And it's very complex in the trauma. And what's so hurtful is that my daughter, my deceased daughter, was impacted by those behaviors. And they'll go on to lie and deny. And it's no telling what happened to many others, you know. Um, so yeah, my history is extensive. I know I haven't been on this channel for a minute. It's been a couple of weeks. Like I said, I was sick. I had phlegm. They said it was because of the wildfires that's going on in Canada, that a lot of people are being impacted. And I'm responsible for my grandchildren, and I'm not always in the best of health. And, I'm just, doing life. But I think it's very imperative. Even with the museum going up, they're picking and choosing whose history is to be implemented. And I think everybody should be concerned because, when you marketing something as being an official record, um, that's alarming. And, I've been, watching on Facebook how, people are saying that they're just ousting them out the history. Because a lot of times, if you're not with the go along, get along. And I remember Stan, um, vaguely. I remember Cool Clyde up in the Bronx because I met them. And I also played with those twins at the T Connection because they was afraid to go up there. And it just so happens that they try to promote one flyer, but some guys that I was down with, that I played with Sound Masters in Brooklyn, Cooper Projects, people were there. I've had to dig up all of this evidence because I have to prove who I am. And I have intellectual property, and I think that stuff that nobody has, that, I've been working on digitizing. It's a lot because sometimes I don't feel well, but digitizing so it can go into the archive. I was able to donate a little something. Well, not donate, scan a little something in the Queens Library. But, when you're telling people that they want you to change your timeline and you don't understand why. And I remember same thing in 2016. 2016 with the women in hip hop at the Alibaba room. Now I remember the girls from the Bronx. I do. But that was like after me. And I was at the Fantasia too in the Fog House. Before I left home, I was getting my behind tore up because I was sneaking out and I was doing, and I just wanted to be free. Mm-hmm. And I had got a chance to, locate another guy, Lucius, and he was the dopest MC, I remember Todd Smith when we wouldn't let him get on the mic. Well, they had rules with the mic. You had to get permission to pass the mic. That's what that was about. And I remember him saying, "Hey, yo, why you didn't pass the mic to me?" Who knows? But I know one thing. I know how to be humble. I had to learn that because I'm 60, I've entered my 60th year on this planet. But I've learned not to be nobody's patsy and nobody's pushover. And I've learned on my own to follow your intuition. And also, don't sign nothing. I was working with Stars on the Rise, and it was this whole big thing. And again, I had to stop and do some research. I've worked with 7-time Apollo winners, R&B group Deep. Jimmy Iovine offered them a one single deal, and they didn't want to give them their creative control. Their managers didn't go for it. They flew them out to California and the whole gamut. And that was a good thing, because you get stuck in these contracts and you can't get out. Same situation with Profile. You know, it was like a blessing. I thought it was a curse because, me and my partner Silk, we didn't get paid for our outfits, no reimbursement, not even for the show. These guys got me again. And they also got me in a horrible way where I was homeless. Did I tell you I was homeless? I don't think so. But I've gone through a lot. I have a very extensive history and survivor story. Like, it just was not easy traveling through the road of jamming into the commercial aspect of the hip hop. And even with the Africa Bambaataa situation. And even like, again, we're going to go back to this museum. I'm the only one that's really concerned, because when you're doing shady stuff and you're compromising and you controlling, you can get in, and she can and she can't. No, she got to dance to this. I'm not doing that. I should never have to change my timeline. And, I've had in my most trying and emotional moment, like, I didn't want to perform, being put on the spot, to try to discredit me. Do you know how much damn trauma and anxiety I've had and what I've gone through? I lost a child, on Thanksgiving and my birthday. And she transitioned in front of my grandkids with a lot of these agencies and, ironically, some political figures, like the Attorney General. To be honest with you, I don't feel any kind of way of what's going on with Letitia James. Just let me say that. Because the stuff that's going on, the still water's running deep. And I'm not going to tiptoe around the damn tulips. We sell our damn own selves out. And, I really believe that's one of the reasons why we ain't never going to receive no reparations. Because people are selling ourselves out now with lies. I remember the female got on there. I remember wanting to speak to her. She was like, oh, I just got off the plane. And then she got up on the podium. And then she want to shine. I'm like, damn, I must pose a threat. I don't pose a threat. I can't get on no damn stage running around. I done been injured twice on my job. I'm taking care of grandkids. But I have an A&D personality, so the creativity is there. And the practice. And every now and then, I can flow. And, I still I have a lot. I have a lot of lyrics, and sometimes it just gets so bottled up. And then I'm running, to doctor's appointments for myself, doctor's appointments for the children. But yeah, they've done some little dirty shit. But you know what? I don't worry about it because karma comes back. And like I said, with the AG, the way I felt about it is that I had requests for inquiries, for investigations, surrounding my daughter's transitioning. 6 weeks later, my godson was murked in Queens, and it hit the papers, and there was a whole heap of cover up, so, and then to see, the political figures flaunting and taunting, a lot of them have done harm, because I've asked different ones in the industry, and they said, you know why? Because a lot of them have engaged into, some criminal, ality. I got to choose my words a little different because of YouTube. Because I'm like, I'm trying to understand what the heck is going on. But I just, I thank God every day that, it has not been an easy pathway for me. But I know one thing, that things happen on purpose, for a purpose. And that, every day that I choose to heal through prayer and meditation, and, I stay away from all substances. I've heard these guys have tried to deprive my grandkids of food. And let me tell you this. Why? Somebody has said a while ago, you got to learn to tell Diddy no. Well, baby, I told somebody no. The audacity for anybody. There's a lot of sick people. Sick. And that's what makes me real leery about this museum, because people are not well. And the things that they've been conditioned and been doing, and to the extent, has caused a lot of grievances. But, you can't go from once and have an aha moment. I would never refer anybody to anyone that have a great possibility of being crapped on, and not treated properly. Never. And I think it's a very disrespectful thing for anybody to try to solicit someone. I got a call 2 days after my daughter's services from one of the morons, and I went the hell off. I remember people, they think because they have this status, these DJs, it gives them a certain entitlement. And maybe some of the girls have been, loosey goose or whatever, preyed upon. They shouldn't have, right? And have been passed around. Not everybody is down for all of that. Some people just want to get their thing going on, and they don't want to sell their souls, because you don't know what they've been through. You get what I'm saying? But the audacity, if I know that you botched up my freaking career and had me on standby and have done all sorts of shady stuff, like 2 sets of flyers, they have more than one flyers. And see, that's the point that I have to bring to the forefront too. People that say, oh, you wasn't there. We didn't have flyers in the park jams. Some people did. You got Baby J was a great promoter. And I don't think the museum is shining a light on him either. Because he's from Queens. They should have just named that the Bronx Museum. And I get so pissed off with Hollis and Queens for the simple fact that, I forgot his name. He had the Hollis Burgers. I never got a chance to go to the Hollis Burgers. I never got a chance to see if any of my flyers was in there, or and my tapes, because I know a lot of my tapes early on, they were overseas because I was getting calls when I was living on Woodhall Avenue with the frenemy. And that whole scene, I should have never been placed in that home. So that's another thing. I'm an advocate for children that are displaced. And some people will say I was a foster child, but how could I have been a foster child when she wasn't receiving any money? And I remember that some paperwork had been given to her from the social worker that just did a surface background. An in-depth background should have been done, and it would have revealed that that person was a victim of domestic violence, DV. That person also, there was a deep and rooted of NS within the lineage line. It was just a mess, you know. And if I didn't think I was traumatized from leaving home with my mother and dealing with that, I almost was unalived. I was raped twice, you know, false pretense. Oh, you're coming here to practice. But in the essence, it's just to lure other people. And that's crazy because when I was 13, when I was introduced by someone that lived in their vicinity, she had to apologize to me because I had to, Hannah, did you know? Did you know? And then I moved out to Astoria, so. And if I hear that damn Melly Mel say it again, like I told him, I'll tell anybody. They'll say, but you wasn't there, that you was too nigga. You didn't know what I was doing. You understand? I was never impressed. Like they classify and they label females. Everybody's not a damn groupie. Everybody don't like you because you just DJ. Artists just appreciate the music and your craft. I remember the time when they told Smalls and Sesame, oh, she's gonna be part of the group. And I'm sure, they were used to Tracy. May she rest in peace. Tracy used to work for Diddy. And I remember when she was in high school, we was in high school. I got me some Palo Santo here. Yeah, I remember. And she told me, and I must have forgot. That's why I said, the new me, the old me, if somebody would have told me. And then in that household, I was being fed, given marijuana. Every open house, free house ain't necessarily a good environment. Had to learn it the hard way. I survived. But I know one thing. I wasn't allowing my grandchildren to go in those systems. There's a lot of stuff going on. And I think the only equitable thing for us to do, since our taxpayer money is paying for that, we have to insist that there's a change. It's got to be a change. Or perhaps the creator is going to do his thing, because I believe in karma. So I've hung out with y'all for about an hour. And I'll tune in tomorrow. So what I need you to do, hit that like button. Please share and subscribe, because we're on the journey of unveiling. We're starting out with the unveiling in hip hop and the corruption. It's not only in the music industry. So unfortunate. What's going on? At that, you all have a great night. Sleep tight. Have good dreams. Please, peace. Please pray for peace, blessings, and light. It's your host, Tam Behind the Mic. Yeah, see, I'm back again. I'm just trying to share this. Let me see. Okay. All righty now.